This is the first time I'm taking a look at 12 stages of transformation with the colors included. Um, and this is also not necessarily 100%. Like, this is the way my brain is looking at it right now. Um, but you might see it a little bit differently. And I'll go through it and just kind of try and orient it with the colors as much as I can. I've categorized satisfaction and dissatisfaction as red. Satisfaction and dissatisfaction is, especially when we take a look at like the Vesica Pisces in relation to what is old and what is new. And if what is old is perhaps a part of the paradigms connected to how we think and how we move through the world, and what is new is especially the potentialities that might begin to show up in inner dance or meditation, going into other different types of energy work and different modalities of consciousness and things that help you to explore, especially what comes through in the inner world. And so maybe this is related also to the outer world, and then this is more the inner world. And satisfaction has a lot to do with what is external. So that would be the outer world relationships, and how often we are looking to something to feel better or to feed our cravings or addictions, attachments, anything that keeps us in a state of consuming. So we often look at 12 stages of transformation alongside the energy management principles. And in relation to that, we could say that satisfaction has a connection to control, consumption, and competition. And anything that often holds us in the polarities or the dichotomies of our experiences when we make comparisons. So that would be connected to competition. Sometimes we're not competing with any person outside of ourselves. Sometimes it's a self competition or a self comparison. I feel like this is where I'm at now. This is where I was last year. I've been working so hard. How come I'm not seeing the results? Or I'm seeing a lot of results, and it's because I've been doing this, and this. And I feel so different from where I was. And maybe it has to do with the kind of things we're consuming. Maybe this is a comparison of I used to watch soap operas all the time, and I was just consuming all this type of media, and then I only started to watch videos on self-help or from spiritual teachers. And so now my comparison is that I'm consuming a different type of media, so it feels better because I have a lot more resources, and it feels like this is a healthy type of consumption rather than just that which is mindless and has no relevance to my personal development. So there's a lot of different ways that we can find ourselves in satisfaction. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And for, let's say, people who eat really simple, satisfaction might just be that banana or that coconut. And there isn't a lot of attachment to needing to eat like all sorts of different things all the time, or having really, really big meals 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. So consumption isn't as intense, but what we do consume makes us feel satisfied in some way. And maybe satisfaction also comes from the daily rituals that we have. And that could be something that's also really good for you. You are satisfied by your yoga practice or the exercise or physical activities that you do. You're satisfied when you take a step into nature and you can appreciate just walking through the forest or going to the beach. And this actually makes you feel quite relaxed and at ease. This is something you're doing to change other factors that you might have showing up that disrupt the foundational balance of your root chakra. And you want to just feel grounded. You want to feel centered and present, and you want to feel like you're able to embody a part of yourself and not feel out of control. So sometimes control comes in and it's there to support us. So we don't have to say that satisfaction is bad, all right? And there's nothing wrong with a person after an inner dance session wanting to have a big meal or like going out for a glass of wine. Sometimes these things can also be grounding and can just help to re-regulate whatever has been in high fluctuation during a session or in a process or after a long immersion with people. And maybe the thing that, you know, after being in a group experience that's really intense and is full on for, even if it's just one session, but it could be days in a row, the thing that'll be satisfying is to just tune out the outside world for a while, and that can help to re-regulate things. So part of us in relation to control isn't trying to always control outside things. Sometimes it's just about, you know, control the environment when you can, so that you can also feel safe and satisfied in where you're at, and you can, you know, compare what it's like when you're in a intensive with a big group of people and what it's like by yourself. And that might actually help you to come into a balance of what would be the old and what is now the new. So at times we need that space to look at like what it was and what it became. So the reintegration is also happening in an active way. And if we take a look at reintegration as this point all the way on the other side of the stages, an element of what is being reintegrated is also looking back at this first part, this satisfaction, and it's having more of a dialogic conversation with it if it is able to come into a reintegration. And sometimes we don't actually get to a full reintegration because we might still be going through certain resistances that have come up. And those resistances might force us actually to move from a different stage back into the satisfaction. And then this is something that we see come up in participants or in ourselves all the time. But if ideally what we're looking at in these stages isn't a completion, like it's not that all of a sudden when you're able to reintegrate, you're completely transformed and you're not at all the same. This loop makes it more like the Ouroboros. That the Ouroboros is the snake eating its own tail, and it just kind of reminds us that, you know, wherever there is a beginning and the sense of an ending, it's it's going to just kind of wrap back around itself again, and that thing that you thought was ending is now a part of this new beginning, and none of it is really, separate. So it's this constant flowing spiral as more and more of it moves deeper and deeper into a process of reorientation around what seemed like it was old and what is now seemingly new, so that you find yourself more in this middle place, and you end up in this middle place more and more. And this is like more the real goal in all of it, because this is what we could also take a look at as the insight, and that's where the most change and transformation happens, because this middle place is also what we might call a boundary site. And boundary sites exist in the 3D world, in nature, in the changing between different environments, and climates, and that is often where you'll find that species evolve the fastest. So I often use the example, like for in Africa, you've got the boundaries between something here in the tropical region, and then you've got the savannas, and then you have the deserts. So at each of these points, whatever species are living at these boundary sites, they exhibit the most resiliency to what is constantly changing them, because they are in between very different types of environments. So you have to figure out how to adapt to both. And the species that would exist more fully in the jungle aren't going to be able to really adapt to the savannas. And then for sure, the things that are in the jungle aren't going to survive in the desert. So what makes it possible for creatures, humans, and the consciousness of the species to have that kind of resiliency to survive? Okay. And that concept on survival, growth, evolution, is exactly what we are experiencing in this middle place, where insight is a part of the birthing of wisdom. And if wisdom is maybe a part of the inner, and knowledge is a part of the outer, we're rewiring a lot of what we believe, or what we've been told, or what has been passed down as a part of these old paradigms. And when we especially dive into an inner dance, and the consciousness becomes aware of itself from a very beautifully unique inner world, it's now, how do you bring harmony to these two parts so that the experience of the world isn't so different than that which arises in the inner world? And this can be confusing because it isn't always easy to come into a perfection of the inner world when the outer world might be really different. And this is where I think like the greatest struggles within satisfaction come up. I'll give like a couple of examples. So someone starts to do yoga teacher training, and they find in their training that it's very important to eat certain things or not eat other things. that if you consume alcohol, this is really disruptive to your energy and it is going to imbalance you or make it really hard for you to maintain this state of purity. And this idea of purity does come up a lot in spiritual work. And maybe when you go into a process yourself, you start to feel like there's a stickiness or that different habits and behaviors you've had for a long time aren't going to support you moving forward if this is the purification of your body, your mind, your spirit. And how are you going to find yourself in the most suitable conditions for this new growth if you still have the same job or you still have the same friends or you engage in the same types of social activities as before? Because now these things for you are not purity, those are impurities. These are the imperfections that are going to make you feel dirty and like you're not able to maintain what that state is. And if the goal is to always be in that state, what do you do? So the struggles around this can go on for a long time. And sometimes it's easy for people. They're like, okay, I'm just going to minimize my friend group. I'm going to have this inner bubble and those that are maybe a part of the training with me that I can talk to, like, this is fine. And we can all hang out together and we'll meditate every night and do our practices together. And then anyone else that I used to be friends with, well, we'll just have to let them know that, things are changing for me. And for others, that's hard because it gets lonely. It starts to feel like you're on the outside and everyone else is on the inside. FOMO is a thing that a lot of people experience. And when you now feel like you have to isolate yourself from these other activities in order to keep your vibration going higher and higher, does it feel higher if you're by yourself all the time? Or does it actually feel nice if you're hanging out with your friends and you're just kind of letting yourself do whatever you want? Often what happens in these kind of situations is, all right, someone says, all right, fuck it, I'm just gonna go out with my friends tonight, I don't care. And then the next day, it's not just the hangover that makes someone feel really uncomfortable, but it's the guilt and the shame and the, oh God, I got really off track. That was fun, but it's not worth it. I really shouldn't have done that. And now all of these kind of thoughts start to make this feel like it's wrong, and it's taking away from the growth. And how are you ever going to get to where you want to be if you if you keep doing things like this? So this can be a real challenge. Let's say if it's not just social, if this is work related and someone starts to realize that they are very dissatisfied with their job, but they have a lot of bills to pay and they've got children and they've been doing this work for a long time and this was what they studied. So they don't know if they can make it doing something else because they don't feel like they have experience. They never went to school for it. There's no certificate. It isn't easy because there's no jobs available. So why would you leave the one you have and risk everything if you're doing well with what it is and you're supporting your family? That's important. So how do we get to balance this out? Because it's going to be a lot harder to go to that job every single day and perform in the same way that you did before this new realization, because there is an awareness that it isn't satisfying you anymore, or you are the people pleaser at work, or you have been filling a role and you didn't realize that you were in a role before, or it just seemed like, but this is what I have to do, so this is what I've done. And now what? Now it's tiring. It's very exhausting. It's so draining to play that role, or to know that when you're there and a part of you feels different, so you start to act differently at work, and others are now aware that you're not doing it the same way as before, and they really took you for granted or took advantage of that role you put yourself in, and now you're not doing it, so it seems like you're rebellious. And so now you're not getting along with your coworkers, or they're calling you a problem, and you're not a problem. You've just stood up for yourself for the first time. You've actually put a healthy boundary in place, and people now are like, that's not okay. You're supposed to do this for me the same way that you always have, because that's what you do. That's who I see you as, and that's what I've known you to be for the last 10 years. So why all of a sudden the change? That can be a big challenge. And how are you going to balance this? All right. So these are really basic life examples, but this comes up so much when people dive into inner work, and it comes up really quick sometimes with inner dance, because all these synoptic connections have changed, the hierarchy of your own sense of self has changed, the parts of you that you believed yourself to be no longer exist, but you know that you've been maintaining things for a long time. So now the visibility of the paradigm is much stronger, and it's clear that there is an old paradigm and a new one, and you're somewhere in between, but that in between isn't integrated yet. And so it's hard to reintegrate the whole experience if you're still witnessing both of these things at the same time, but they haven't come together yet. So, the old is still way over here and the new is way over here. And you know that they belong together. They're going to fuse at some point. When they do fuse, the synergy is probably going to be amazing, but you're not there yet. So this can take time. This could take years. It could take months. It could take days. It could maybe take lifetimes. And maybe that's the work, that when a person comes into this life, as they start to become more aware of the insights and the wisdom that are going to support them vibrationally to keep going. After this life is done, do you have to repeat things over again? Maybe it's not going to be this planet, because maybe humans aren't going to be able to stay on this planet for too much longer, at least not in the same numbers that we have today. And, things are going to reduce quite a lot in order for the planet herself to regenerate. I think she'll be fine when there's a lot less of us humans, because we're a bit parasitic at the moment. But in general, like, if you come into this life actually knowing everything, and there's never actually anything to learn, the whole part of the journey in which you feel like you're learning something new is really a remembrance. And if you knew before you were even born where you would get to by the time this, thing we call life, that in the time frame of a universe is less than what it takes to blink your eyes, and yet it feels so long, so stretched out while we're here. How was it that you were witnessing yourself leaving this life before you even got into your body. Okay, if we take a look at that birth vision as a part of what you existed as before satisfaction was even a part of your existence, how many times did you already know you'd be going through these spirals to see what you already were after you died? But before you had a chance to forget everything in order to have the experience of living your life. I can't repeat that again, but it's recorded, so this is the nonlinearity of things. And this is actually how it works at a quantum level. And this is what we get really confused by in our life experiences. We feel like, okay, I go step 1, step 2, step 3, stage release and purgation. Cool, I did that. And now stage, is that awakening or illumination? I don't know. We're somewhere. Oh gosh, dark night of the soul. So once I get out of this, am I good? Like, now that I don't feel like I'm in dark night of the soul anymore, can I just reintegrate all of this and feel completely alive and full of rejuvenation, and there's no need to, pass through any of this again? Or is that perception maybe what happens, especially in spiritual bypassing? A lot of practices, without saying it because it would be hypocritical, but end up being hypocritical because the practices tell you that if you just stick with it long enough, you're gonna get to that unitive place, and you're gonna transcend all of these different things, and you can get there before you die. And if you experience it and you believe it, and your belief in that experience is so strong that you don't feel like you ever have to look at it again, is that faith or is that bypassing? I'm not going to answer that, okay? A lot of how we experience things does require our own trust in the perceptions that we hold, all right? And so if you really, really believe it, that does in many, many ways make it real. That might not be the way other people see it, but if you really believe it and that's how you're living it, you could go through your entire life feeling like, no, I am this enlightened being. I don't have to look at any of that. These things, no, that's all gone. I did the work already. If that seems to come up, that's you. There's a lot of gaslighting involved in things like this, where if somebody says, yeah, but I meditate every single day, so now this gives me the right to hold this teacher role because this is what my practice is, and this is what I convince myself is working for me. So I'm going to project that that's you and not me, and you're the one that has more work to do because do you meditate as much as I do? So, well, if you don't, then I must be more right than you. This, for me, is exactly when I become aware that there's a lot more spiraling for someone to do, because they're speaking in the language that shows me that competition and comparison is still really strong in their system. So there's a lot of need to self-satisfy, which in the spiritual world happens a lot. People are coming into self-satisfaction and denial of the process, or that, if I don't remember which call I mentioned it in, but if life really is about the journey and never the destination, then anytime you think that you've gotten somewhere as a destination and you're good, it means that you're gonna have to kind of take a look back at the journey and the process of going through that journey a little bit more, because most of the time when people are actually very present with the journey itself, you couldn't possibly judge someone else for their journey or the way that they're going through it. And you wouldn't want to be the one spouting out advice for how they should do it. You'd end up being the one that's just kind of listening to see, like, what is someone sharing? Because I don't know. I'm not going to be doing it the same way as they are. And that is the uniqueness of what makes us human and present in a body. But because so much of this is shared, there is always going to be something more to look at. And the more we can do that from this middle place, the more we can also become compassionate with wherever we are at in the journey, because we're not all going to be in the same part at the same time. So if someone's sharing with me about how emotional they are or how stuck they feel, I'm not telling them that they've got a lot of work to do or they should try this, or just like let it go back to love and light and everything's going to be fine. This is also, it's I won't try and label people for where they're at necessarily. Okay. Like sometimes facilitators come into this and they're like, okay, 12 stages. So where am I at right now? Or where is that participant at? Because this is maybe going to help me help them. And yeah, maybe. And there are times when I can, just be really, really compassionate with someone who's sharing with me, and I can tell it really sounds like Dark Night of the Soul. And that one in particular is so challenging, and can be really, really frustrating, especially for people who have been on the path for a long time. Because, if you look at how many stages you go through before you even get to what we would call Dark Night, you've done a lot of work. So then why does it feel so hard? And how long does it have to be for? And can anyone give you that timing in which it's going to start feeling different? And most of the time with Dark Night, and this is why I put it in that more indigo blue color, is because it's all in your mind. But that's shit to say something like that. Oh, it's just all in your head. No, it is. And that's because that's where the energy is often hardest to move between what is that old and what is that new, and find that middle place. So Dark Night can cause this spiraling many times over before it'll break through to another stage. So perhaps in any one of these stages, you're going through 12 stages for each stage. And I'm sure I could figure out ways of looking at that in a different stage other than Dark Night, but that one's a really great example. You might have to go through multiple spirals of the 12 stages before you can break through that Dark Night stage. And you'll know it when you get to the breakthrough, or when suddenly it's the exact synchronicities of the polarity that come at the exact same time and makes you realize, okay, and showing up from both ends at the same time. Now what? So I'll give a little example about this. My friend has been going through like a whole bunch of crazy stuff at work, and he meditates every day. He does his yoga practice and his breath work every day, and he's needed to maintain this for the last couple of years and keep himself out of the old friend groups and the old social stuff. And he's a really talented musician, and he's stopped playing music in the last couple of years just to really, go through some of this. And yet there are these moments when it's felt really, really stuck for him. And this has come up very intensely recently. And so we were talking last night, and I just kind of used the analogy of the tunnel, because for me, dark night is, and I haven't used that language with him, but to say, yeah, you're in the tunnel. You're in the tunnel. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. You're in the tunnel. You're very aware that here's the tunnel. It's dark, and you don't see the light yet, but okay, this is what it is right now. And that sucks, because every day you go to work, you're aware that there is no satisfaction. You can't get no satisfaction. And there's not going to be anything major changing today, tomorrow, probably not next week, and maybe not for the next few weeks or few months. So what's it going to be like to get up every day and be like, yep, time to engage in the tunnel again? And then something kind of really cool happened. I think just talking about it that way, being able to laugh about it, being able to like just feel a little bit lighter instead of all the back and forths in his brain and the overthinking and the parts that are like, this sucks and I'm frustrated and I get it, like I'm somehow stuck and I don't want to be, and I don't know what to do about that. But this idea of the Vesica Piscis, this boundary site, this place where, all right, like there's so much of you that is aware of the new, and yet a part of you that is making its way through this old. And it's challenging at any of these stages, but especially if you're just in the darkness of a tunnel. So today, he messaged me to say that he got a 10% raise at work for all of the stuff he's dealing with. And then at the exact same time, like right after they gave him this raise, he got a message from another company that has been really interested in stealing him and getting him on board with them for maybe like a year now, but they occasionally message, and here comes this message for which he could possibly just, change jobs completely at the same time he's getting the raise. That's the polarities, and like that's really confusing. So now you're in the tunnel and there's multiple lights. Like, which direction do you go? And how do you end up finding yourself in the unitive place with all of this? And is it going to come from taking steps towards a direction? Maybe yes, maybe no. I'm gonna just kind of like share the way that I take a look at it from this part. How do you move through then? Now you're in the tunnel, but you've got multiple lights ahead of you. So it's not just one light at the end of the tunnel, it's whichever direction you want to choose. And I said to him, the most important thing right now is just to continue to hold a sense of value for yourself. Know how worthy you are of all of this. Don't limit yourself by what you see is ahead of you and the feeling that you have to choose one thing. And if you can just stay with yourself while you're in the tunnel, because even, yeah, of course, like that raise is going to happen and the potential to move to a new place is also still there. So it's not today, just because things are breaking through, that you're actually getting to the unitive state, or that you're going to reintegrate all of this change. Just because you see the lights now doesn't mean you've gotten there. You still have to go through the tunnel. So what's most important? And that's just, know your self-worth. Don't devalue yourself. Don't feel like all of the back and forth or the feelings of the polarity or needing to have to make a decision are keeping you from how far you've come. You've come so far, and you deserve every bit of it, and you deserve to be happy. So if you know that by continuing in this job, you're going to have to be responsible for fixing everyone else's problems that don't belong to you at all, and you didn't start them. But you're going to get paid a lot for doing it. Is that going to make you happy? And you get to make these kind of choices. All right. Um, a lot of times the dark night shows up, especially in the spiritual journey, when people now are beginning to share, or when they feel like they've worked so hard, they've done so much, they've been meditating every day, and nothing is changing, or nothing seems to be shifting, or all of a sudden this physical ailment comes up and it's really hard to heal. It's taking a long time, or uh, there's the perception that I should be so much further along. I've been doing this for so long already. And that's a part of like the struggles of the ego in relation to Dark Knight. And that's it, right? For my friend, the ego part is on the limiting beliefs side of things, where ego is destructive in a self-destructive way. There's also ways in which ego can be destructive in an external way, where it's not self-destructive. It's like, I'm so amazing, I've been doing this, and so I deserve to be here because look at what I've already been doing. And that self-glorification, or that, yeah, the maybe self-proclamation of where you believe yourself to be at, is also what ends up limiting you from getting any further, because you can't self-proclaim anything and then expect that that's actually what the universe believes or knows, or that, especially if what you feel is that you'll never have to go back into these stages again. That's the ego that needs to die. And the Dark Knight is really good at creating death, or giving you the space to die if you would like to do that for yourself and be like, yes, let's kill that part of me because it's actually not happy. It's not helping me in any way. The ego attachments are tough. And when someone has been really successful with their business, or they've been doing really well with whatever they're sharing, and the feedback is just always so good, like, you're so amazing, I feel so good, thank you so much, this healing was perfect, like, and all of this starts to just make you feel like, okay, there's no end, or I'm on top of the world right now. That's exactly when it's hard to hear the difference between what is the source energy and what is the ego energy. And it's hard to know, like, is this all real, or is this a drive into this direction and I'm actually playing a role? And within myself, I didn't notice that I was playing the role so much because I was so driven, so passionate, so ready to be the healer, that I never took a step back to observe myself and how hard I was pushing to get there, believing that I was already there. And then it gets to a point where no one shows up, or everyone has a bad experience, or something else in the personal life seems to contrast what is happening in this spiritual life so much that there's doubt, and or someone's forced to take a step back. And then that's when it's also really challenging, because ego doesn't like to be the observer. Ego likes to be the driver. Ego doesn't want to go sit in the back seat and like count how many trees are going by as you're driving. It wants to be the one watching the speedometer to see how fast you can go. So if ego has to sit in the back seat and let something else drive, it can be a really big struggle. And this comes up a lot with Dark Knight too. I know I went from Satisfaction all the way to Dark Knight without looking at anything else in between, and just kind of did like reintegration, Satisfaction, and let's focus on Dark Knight. Uh, I'm gonna try and like backtrack and take a look at a few other things and see how to go through this. But let me pause for a moment and open this up and see about some more dialogic interactions, any feedback, questions, anything you'd like to share, Rebecca.
Is there a connection between the dissatisfaction you might feel after satisfaction and Dark Night of the Soul?
Yeah, the dissatisfaction after satisfaction is when you actually start to feel empowered more from that inner place, right? If satisfaction is the sense of uh like autopilot mode in relation to the outside world, and knowing that you go to work, you get paid, you get to buy your stuff, you take care of your family, you go back to work, you get paid, you buy your stuff, you take care of your family, and there's no change. And this is the autopilot mode. Dissatisfaction is when you're like, I don't think I can do this anymore. This isn't serving the inner self. I don't feel like I'm able to replenish anything. Or I'm now aware that if I keep doing this, I'll never really get to know me, because all of my energy goes to serving this purpose or meeting these requirements, hitting deadlines, or just being the mom or being the doctor, being the role. And the dissatisfaction, when let's say that's not the extreme case that we're in, just might make us aware like, wow, I'm dissatisfied with meat. I'm starting to feel like this vibration doesn't serve me so much, and so I think I should take meat out of my diet. Or the same kind of thing, I'm not satisfied with this social life or my lifestyle, and I feel like I do need to take that step away from my friends. I love them, but maybe this isn't the best type of an engagement for me. Another thing could be religion. I'm not satisfied with this one God. I now get it. There's so much consciousness, life, God, source, spirit energy in me. I can't listen to the same thing all the time and just blindly believe it. So I'm dissatisfied with that. It could be the cultural standards, and I would say, like, in America, one thing I wish I could see more of. Maybe I need to step away from my own words. It sounds like a big opinion. I don't spend that much time in the outside world right now, so this is also why I don't see so much of it. But I don't meet that many people in which I can have open, authentic, vulnerable conversations and dialogues without the opinionations becoming the center of the talking. And so for me, I would love to see that people become dissatisfied with opinionated speech, and just, having opinions be that which satisfies them. If they think that by having that opinion and comparing what they believe to what someone else believes, and then competing with someone else's belief systems, that now suddenly this is going to make you feel good. Politics make this challenging. I mean, we know the COVID narrative, and like like, oh, are you an anti-vaxxer, or oh, this and that, and like there's very strong separation between like one side and the other, and that's a major issue when it comes to like, why do you speak and what do you say, and does it matter, or does it just matter that then you seem like you got the best last word, and as long as that was the case, whether it be that you said it the loudest or the fastest, or you used the biggest words, or quoted the most number of news castings that you were watching, whatever it might be, right? Like, these are all forms of satisfaction. So gosh, I would love to see that more people become dissatisfied with that, so that they just stop talking so much nonsense. Dissatisfaction in the inner dance, when we take a look at like the actual process of facilitating a session, is if satisfaction is the conscious mind, dissatisfaction is when you say, we're going to lay down and close our eyes, we're going to go into a horizontal position, and we're going to shut out the outside world. We're going to intentionally open up a space that says, whatever is old, whatever is outer, whatever is external is meaningless right now. And maybe we're not saying this out loud because that might feel weird for people, but by inviting them into this horizontal space with their eyes closed, they are activating a dissatisfaction of the conscious waking mind in favor of whatever else might open up. Yeah, dissatisfaction is good. if like looking at the angle of satisfaction that I've ended with is seen as not necessarily bad, but the part of our conditioning that we can allow to dissolve. And by creating the conditions under which it's possible to dissolve old forms of patterning that leads to satisfaction, we are able to slowly move into these disintegrations that can open up new pathways for that hyper primed state to make visible all of these different parts just by being the observer. And whether that be the person who's laying down as the participant, observing themselves and having this dialogue as they're moving through different emotions and sensations and visions, or whether it be us as the facilitator in witness of a room and everyone who is laying down. It's not going to be the facilitator pinpointing exactly where someone is at in a session that makes the person in that stage. There are some key ways that our bodies move when they are moving that might help us notice these stages, or that are like emotions are coming through, and that can make us aware of the stages. But in the same way that I've spoken about the way our mind works with perceptions around an entity or absorbing or something getting stuck, it's when you yourself say, oh, they have a blockage in their throat chakra, I need to remove that blockage. That's when the blockage is there. As soon as you see it as a blockage and then think that there's something that needs to be removed, that you've created the perspective of blockage and made the relationship between what you perceive and what is happening a part of a stuckness that needs to change. So if you feel something, but you don't label it, and you're able to observe it energetically and from the quantum level of the way energy works, by observing it without labeling it, you're not specifically identifying with it as something. So the mind isn't then latching on to the thoughts and the words and the sequence in which, by thinking something, all the different analogies start to open up, but it's very hierarchical, or it's based on connotations. And so the way you think about something, if it suddenly becomes a hierarchy, the systems of interpretation will try to hierarchically solve that problem by identifying something as a blockage and then saying, let me move that. You are in a sense solving a problem, and that creates dissonance. Yes, energy has the potential to move when you observe it, and in your observation of it are doing things to support that movement. But when I'm working with someone, I still need to be the observer of the energy rather than trying to identify for myself what I believe it to be. I don't want to make projections onto people. So it's the same with the stages. I'm not going to say that someone is in, release and purgation when they're really in dark night, or I'm not going to say, oh, you're just going through dark night of the soul when they are actually struggling with the threshold. So we can support people with languaging that mirrors what they've already shared. If they're sharing something verbally, that can make it a lot easier, because we might be able to hear when someone is saying like, I feel like I'm on the edge of something. I feel like I have 2 feet. I have 1 foot in each world. I can see it this way and then I can see it that way. But I'm afraid. I'm afraid to just fully jump in or take that risk. Yeah, that might be threshold, right? They're literally saying things that create this visual of being half here and half there. And if we were just to look at, okay, well, what is the threshold? A lot of times we would think of the threshold as that doorway, right? And if you've got this doorway as the threshold, right, then you still have to walk through it. You still have to open the door and get to the other side. Sometimes a threshold is a doorway between what is known and what is unknown. And you don't really know. You don't know until you go into the unknown. You have to leave behind everything that was known. And this is a really big first step, because there are times people come into inner dance and they get to dissatisfaction. They feel really relaxed. They are letting themselves rest. And afterwards they say, yeah, that felt really good. That was really relaxing. But maybe that's all that they shared. And so they went somewhere. But maybe there was still a fear of letting go. With the threshold, you have to be willing to let go. Because you can't keep 1 foot on either side of the door if you want to go somewhere. You gotta pass through it completely. And it's only when you allow yourself to really like trust that you can let go? Do you end up in the surrender that allows for the release and purgations to happen? And once you step over the edge of whatever it is, or you step through that threshold, um, there is a really beautiful potential for release to spontaneously occur. And people sometimes are, really ready to release. Go to a place like Kopanjang, and everybody is they went through the threshold before they even walked in the door. Like as soon as they lay down for the inner dance session, it's just instantaneous release. And that's like the first step, because they knew that even just living on this island, they weren't satisfied with the rest of the world. So nobody's really trying to live in satisfaction if you've got a one room bungalow, and or like you just spend your whole day in a hammock and it's just nature and coconuts or something, or you go live in an eco village. Or there's so many different ways that people have in their everyday life moved away from satisfaction, so they're constantly living in dissatisfaction. That makes them a lot more ready to come into a process like inner dance, because them coming into that room is them already saying yes to the unknown, already saying, I trust this, I trust myself in this, and I am definitely prepared to go wherever next this is going to take me. I don't have to work on getting myself into a dissatisfaction. This is my natural state right now, and let's just go for it. So when you get the people that start moving even before the music comes on, they're already there. So this is when it can be helpful to slow things down or speak to that, because not everybody in the room is there. You're going to have some people who have entered into the space and are still really unsure, like, is this safe? Is this okay? Like, I am very satisfied with my life. I like who I am. I'm totally cool with everything that I do. And I am, um, I'm looking at you and I am judging you. Why is this person moving already? Like, we haven't even started yet. What's going on over here? Because I don't know about that. I don't think that's what I'm gonna do. And now that I see them doing it, is that what we're all doing? I'm not sure. Okay, so like if you've got like these different kind of extremes coming into the room at the same time, how do you bring everybody into coherence or into a resonance that can shift deeper in a state of symmetry, or in that more collective resonance, rather than everybody being in different places all at the same time? So I might speak to the release, and I'm just trying to think, like, what would I even say in a situation like this? No, like, yeah, I think most of the time I would actually just speak to letting it slow down, slowing it down so that you can see it. In slowing it down so that you can be that tear that is falling down your cheek. Slow it down so that the sound that is coming through you is the vibration that ripples through every cell of your body. That slows it down. It's not stopping the release, it's just moving it into an even more subtle coherence with itself, to observe it at an even deeper level. And that might not do anything to stop the screaming or the crying in that moment, but it also brings everyone in the space, if they can hear me speaking, into the observation of the actual shedding of a tear, not just looking at someone in the room who's crying, right? We're not just hearing these sounds. You feel the vibrations more, and that can help people trust things because they don't have to feel so separate from where they are and where someone else is at. And another part would be helping others that are not yet through the threshold to move into that surrender, to move deeper into that trust, to let themselves let go to, let's say, their own heartbeat. And maybe that can be helpful. Using the heartbeat as a part of the rhythm that connects you to more of the universal flow, that it's both known and unknown. In the same way with the breath is both known and unknown. It can become a very automatic thing that we don't think about, but the more that we look at it, the more we know it. But what's underneath the breath, or what is the source of that life force energy that we call breath, or in what way, by tuning into what you know about your own breathing, do you end up needing to let go to what is moving you? That life force moves you. You don't control it. And that can bring in more surrender because you become aware both that you can focus on this, but almost the more that you focus on it, the more you have to surrender to it. So that's maybe a helpful way to support people through the threshold, because it's tough if you have people that you know are laying down, but they're really tight because they're not sure what's going on around them. And it's clear that people aren't all in the same space. The way that we work with this with the music is to use these first few stages in connection with the first part of the inner dance wave flow, so that by the time you get to the first delta drop, you're hopefully getting everyone into more of a synergy in the room, more of a coherent space of resonance, and hopefully people would be able to then trust whatever comes up next, because they're already through an initial motion and now at a state where you bring things back into the delta, but you've already gone through one wave. And that's especially when, you know, people are moving through that at different timings. You know, if somebody already comes in as in release, maybe they feel more of an awakening by the time you get to that delta drop. But for someone who's been in tension or distrust, maybe this is when they finally do start to release. So you get to that delta drop, and now someone has, wow, like tears are now bursting through. And they were the one that just seems to be like having a really hard time to let go before you got to that next delta. And for someone else, it's like, oh, finally the light. Like all of this light is now connecting me to myself more, and I can start to feel this possibility towards illumination coming through. Disintegration is that feeling that like you've cried it all out, you've shaked it all out. Something has moved through. You've purged a part of you. You've let something die. You're in the nothingness. You've connected with a part of this empty space, and maybe something is going to move from here. So that can go along with the music. A lot of times it does. But I also find that even in one session, disintegration is a part that I think feels really good for people. You release, you purge, and then you dissolve. And then something else starts to kind of build up, and then you dissolve again. And so, in the flow of the music as well, between the deltas and the high beta gamma states, there's perhaps a feeling that another part of you has disintegrated each time you get back into that quiet space. Um, or it could be the opposite, even you feel much more connected with yourself when you're in the deltas because you're used to meditation music, or this is when you actually feel like you are most centered. And so you seem to be completely broken apart. It's just total chaos. This is confusing. You have no idea where to grasp back onto that anchor of your center, your 0 point when you're in these high states that seem to kind of be all over the place. So that can be another kind of disintegration. There's no focal point. There's no way for you to come back into that middle place. So that is a different kind of disintegration. So that's when people might be disintegrating right before the drop. So that's when the drop is actually creating more of an awakening. Awakening and illumination are very similar, but one of the biggest differences is that awakening is filled with connotations these days. You talk to people and they give examples of their spiritual awakening, and this is when I woke up, or they know the difference between when they felt like they were asleep and when they had an awakening. A lot of the kundalini energy is associated with awakening. So as soon as you've had that feeling of all of this moving up and exploding through your head, it feels like you're there. Oh, I know it. I've already had that before. I've already had an awakening. And that is when I think in this work, it is maybe most important to continue supporting people, because a lot of practices, I think, try to bring people to awakening and then they just leave them there. Or that's as far as it goes, and they don't have tools or ways of conceptualizing things that take you beyond it. So once you get to that awakening and it feels really good, then that's the end goal in some way. And that's fine, I think. If you know, if the goal is for a bunch of people to have an experience of energy and then think that that's the ultimate goal. This is when I usually bring in the Buddhist saying of, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. If you have an enlightening experience and then you decide, I don't need to chop wood and carry water anymore, that's what you do before you have anything happen. Now, if you've had something happen, you tell everybody about your experience of having something happened and how amazing it is. And now you try and teach exactly what you did so that other people do it, so that no one ever has to chop wood, carry water ever again. Why would we do that? And this is why people end up in the dark night of the soul. It's because they're in denial of the reality of just being in the humanness. Awakening takes people out of humanness, and it ends up creating a lot of fragmentations around a part that believes itself to be 100% spirit and not human, or devoid of any need to go through the human experience ever again. It ends up bringing up a lot of like the messianic complexes that show up. Someone who believes that they're now the savior of the planet, that they're here to heal the world, it's all on them, or that like they are the new Jesus. There's nothing wrong with having this sense of being the superhero who can take on everything and has this um, you know crazy capacity to just catalyze from their own energy the awakening of an entire planet. I'm here to wake up everyone, and then if I just stick with that, then the whole planet is going to be a much better place. Once the work gets hard, or when somebody questions this, or has doubt in relation to like, wait, I'm the one who's doing that. I'm the one who's here for that. You can't be that person. I'm that person. How can there be two of us? No, no, no. One of us must be better than the other one. And then again, like, so here in awakening, you end up seeing like a lot of the need for the satisfaction. I have to validate myself. I can't validate you. If I validate you, that must be invalidating me. So we can't both be just as awake as the other. And now again, there's all of these times in which, again, satisfaction comes up. So in some way, we're almost always rerouting back. A part of our brain is always in this old part, and we're never going to get to the new completely until maybe all of us get there. So we have to be okay with the middle place. We have to be satisfied to be somewhere in between. And I think that's where humanity is, because our consciousness doesn't have the capacity to get any further until enough of us end up with this as perhaps a way of processing our own experiences in a collective sense of we're all going through it, rather than this is my experience, that's your experience, these are my story parts, you don't know what I've gone through to get here, or how much I've done, or what I've worked so hard at, and I'm comparing myself to you. So, or I'm older than you, I am obviously wiser. And all different things. So we end up finding these are just the loops that we have to keep looking at over again and being compassionate with, because there's no one right way to do it. And it doesn't matter how many times you have to go back to satisfaction yourself. Just know that it's a part of the journey, and it's okay. And we need to be patient with each other. We have to, one, be patient with ourselves, but we also really have to learn how to be patient with each other. There's no way for us to actually get to the new until enough of us get to this middle place where we're willing to observe that part of the old in each of us with compassion and and vulnerability, so that we can validate where any one person is at. You'll find so many people that have an awakening experience and are suddenly a life coach. um, or they've created a workshop and they have this new healing thing because they're like very sure that this awakening for them, when they were channeling all of these aliens from some other galaxy, downloaded all this information that now needs to be shared with the world. And I've met a lot of these people, and they have a very singular focus. Like, I am this, nothing can change that, and this is my mission. And that's the direction that it all has to go. And everybody should jump on board with this, because I was given this information. And so awakenings can be challenging, because when you're in it, you are it. You are this awakened vessel from exactly where you see it. And you are not satisfied with the life you had before. You don't believe in anything that existed in your life prior to this awakening. You are now embodying this state of awakenedness. And if the Kundalini energy woke up really strong with this experience, there is so much rushing through your system. You probably are channeling a lot. You probably are super psychic in that moment. You probably do have an ability to connect with what someone else is going through without them telling you anything. Say back to them exactly what's happening, scare the shit out of them because you're super spot on, and then end up in a really uncomfortable place because it's really hard to trust someone who is so forcefully spitting some of this out. There's no sense of empathy in it at that stage. It's just, I am the vessel and I'm going to tell you everything. And I don't really care what happens to you afterwards because this is just what I'm being told to say. Right? This is where ego can still be super, super strong. In awakenings with the Kundalini energy just shooting up like that, doesn't know. Ego didn't have a chance to get looked at yet because that's what dark night is for. So ego is still really, really high while Kundalini is really high. So in the awakening, there's a lot of confusion. It feels like there's no ego, but it's because ego is nowhere to be found. Ego is scared of all of this new energy and how much you're channeling or how much you're downloading or like how intense all of this is. And ego's like, shit, that's not for me. I'm just gonna like hang out back here for a while. I'll see you later. Have fun with all this. It's cool. Good job. Like that's awesome. But I'm not gone yet. I'm just gonna be kind of like chilling out in the background for now. And once this starts getting a little bit more challenging for you, I will see you then. And then I'll be there right in the back of your head, ready to make you question everything. Because at some point, I know it, that energy is not sustainable. This energy of the awakening is not sustainable. There is no way for you to be human and this awakened, enlightened being at the same time because humanity isn't there yet. So at some point, I get it. You're going to have to, level yourself out. And I might be the leveler when we get there. But for right now, have fun. So people go through years of this sometimes. Sometimes it lasts just for months. Sometimes it's only just in an inner dance. And then by the time they get to the end, they realize, okay, that was cool. I had a huge release, a big rush. There was all of this energy. And then it started to try to normalize, or it scared me. And then maybe that fear was my ego. But one thing I say to people a lot is your fears love you so much they don't want to see you get hurt. Isn't that so nice? Your fears love you so much they just don't want to see you get hurt. And in some way they're trying to take care of you. There's no reason to then be upset that you're afraid. It's just thank your fears for being there. Thank your fears for wanting to protect you. And when you can appreciate that they have purpose, and perhaps it's because you experienced something really traumatic in your life, or you went through some really intense struggles, that these fears are present. They're not there to hurt you. They want you to be safe. So they put doubts in your mind, or they make you question, like, what is this thing that's happening? Is this safe? Is this okay? If I let myself go out of my body, am I ever going to come back? That's a big fear that people have. They start to have all this energy move up and they can feel themselves going very far away from what they normally feel is grounded. And they're like, I don't know if I'll come back if I let myself go that far. Will I come back? And then that might be the exact thing that brings someone into choice. Like, the illumination after the awakening is the realization that, okay, this could be sustainable, but I think there might be a lot of work to do. And then this is when you have to start making choices. Do I let this keep going if you're like in the middle of a session? Or do I actually have to start taking things out of my life? If I leave my job, am I going to be a failure? Is my marriage going to fail? Is my family going to fail? Am I going to be looked down on by everyone else around me because I was this successful person doing all of this amazing stuff and then I just dropped it all and now I'm driving an Uber because I don't know what to do in the in-between time and I haven't figured that out yet. I don't know. I mean, like so many different things, right? So these are the things that we end up looking at in a very different way. We're not choosing to go back, but we're definitely not there yet. And it doesn't seem like everything is lining up in the same way as when we had the awakening. Because if that Kundalini energy woke up, feels awakened, and made you bliss out for like 3 months, and everything was synchronous, and everything was lining up, and everything seemed absolutely perfect, there was never a moment when you didn't feel the bliss. And now you realize, like, okay, I'm not quite human right now. And when this energy does start to normalize or slow down, or the vibration isn't this high, there's going to be a lot of work to do. What am I going to have to do to make it work? So, yeah, we come into these constant choices. Do I choose this? Do I choose that? If I choose this, am I going to feel like a failure if it doesn't work out? If I don't choose that, will I feel stronger for not choosing it? If the choice is to change a habit, release an addiction, meditate every day instead of watching soap operas, do you feel stronger for it? How long do you have to do it before you feel like it is working? Is it about how much time you do it for in order to feel like it's working? Do you need to feel like something's working before you decide to do it every day? What if it feels like it's not working? Do you keep doing it? Do you go off to the next thing? These are the kind of questions that come up. Or the kind of questions of like, am I doing this right? Am I not doing this right? If somebody had a bad experience, is that my responsibility? Is it my responsibility to make them have a good experience? Is it okay if they have an uncomfortable experience, but they think that's a bad experience? So because they don't like discomfort, they see it as bad. But I'm okay with discomfort, so that's not bad. But do I feel guilty that they think it is? All of this can be very confusing. So choice, strength and failure, dark night, these kind of like boom, 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 they just go back and forth and back and forth. And our mind is just filled with different ways of interpreting scenarios or thinking about what could happen and then having a fear of doing it wrong or not doing it enough or wondering if it's too much. So, for example, in a session, someone has a release. They are crying, or their body is shaking, and then at some point later on in the session, they realize there's more. Now, though, they already had one release, and they're not sure. Like, can I let myself do this again? Did I already let this go? What if I need to scream? Is that okay? I have to make a choice. Do I let the sound out or do I keep it in? if I let this sound out and it disturbs someone else in the room, am I failing at inner dance because now I've made somebody else uncomfortable? If I feel completely exhausted at the end of this session, um, and I'm maybe embarrassed for being so vulnerable, this could be like another type of a dark night. Like I became really, really vulnerable, and now I'm aware that I became very vulnerable, and now I don't want to be so vulnerable anymore, so I kind of want to protect myself. And that's when like little things can kind of creep in, and it could start to feel like, yeah, I don't know now. I know I have a lot to think about. I just let out a lot, but it's making me really uncomfortable because I'm aware that associated with memories from my childhood that I haven't worked out completely. And now I'm at the end of the session, and all I have are these memories from my childhood experience that I went through, and I'm just not fully there yet. So this could be, the discomforts towards the end of the session and do make somebody curl up in fetal position and just don't touch me, please don't touch me anymore. Like I need to be alone. I'm aware of something that's in me and it's not worked out yet. So um thanks for bringing it up, everybody. And this is a really good reason why at the end of a session, it is important for us to get to the unitive state. It is important for us to bring the music back into a place where there could be some type of celebration, or when there is an element that allows for the joyfulness to come back. Sometimes unitive state is only about creating the cosmic joke. If somebody starts to get really uncomfortable because they were vulnerable and now they don't want to be vulnerable anymore because they've just been crying for like an hour and they haven't even cried for the last couple of years, um, get that space to a place where they can laugh at themselves a little bit. This is when, especially with the unitive, I will go around and play instruments, or um, if someone starts laughing and then I might just giggle because it's nice if that laughter can get contagious. It's also really nice if someone starts clapping to the music. As a facilitator or participant, doesn't really matter. Just kind of bringing things back up energetically into more of that like tribal coherence. If you can start to allow the space to feel like the tribe, then no one's alone. Then this is how the room can shift the dark night into the unitive, just by remembering itself as this collective journey as well as this collective consciousness. Dark night makes us feel very isolated, very alone, and as though like no one else can do it for you, but it's really hard to do it for yourself. So remembering that if everyone's doing it, we're all doing it alone, but we're all doing it all one. It's all one and it's alone all at the same time. And that's the cosmic joke. And that's beautiful because that's really what unity is that like it is alone and all one at the same time. Now, can you bring that into a reintegration? Because it's still going to be you that has to do the work as soon as you get up off the mat and open your eyes, but somehow we're doing it all together, and we are all in this together. But that's why like we don't get to all be the new until we all go through the aloneness and just recognize what the work is for each of us and take responsibility for it in some way. But then not judging anyone for where they're at in their stages of transformation, because we don't get to fully transform until we're transforming together. And that doesn't mean we're all in the same place at the same time. It just means that we become more aware that this is the work. aware that the one thing I didn't get to with this yet is some of the things that Edgar brought up about like if you're doing a retreat and you wanted to maybe focus on one thing each day. I think this is it, it should be really possible, you know, in the same kind of way that if we might talk about one color each day, what we're doing is we're just working with the vibrations, the frequencies, the cellular relationships to each of these different stages. And if we come into a dialogue and we are speaking to it directly, it'll hold us, and then we can take a look at like what shows up in the inner dance itself, because if the inner dance is an experience and what we are is diving into the experience of ourself within an intention. If the intention is to look at one of these stages, or we're already looking at the stage before we get into the session itself, then that intention would be in the energy field that we're already kind of vibrating to. So that would be perhaps like the point through which the energy starts to move further. It might mean that, and this happens sometimes when I'm doing the colors, is that by the end of a session, people already start to feel the frequency of the next color. Even though we're going to get there the next day, it's like by the time they get through that session related to the energy of one color, their body is now very, very aware that this is kind of where it's going next. So it could be that like it it takes like the first half of a session to work through that, you know, really intense awakening energy, and then at the end of the session nobody feels really good about it because nobody feels like they're an awakening anymore. They feel like it's illumination, and they're like, I have a lot of questions. Or now I have a lot of insights about the questions, but that means that like I'm beginning to feel responsibility and it doesn't feel as fun. Or in like the reverse, like you get to disintegration and then suddenly everyone just feels so good. It's not like disintegration feels bad, it's suddenly like you feel like you're ready for something, and then it ends up moving into something like an awakening. And I haven't done this before in a retreat or an immersion, so I don't have that direct experience, but I think that'd be amazing to see. And the more that we're able to also feel what is the emergent potential of the qualities of each stage by dialoguing, the more we would know it by being in it. But it might be hard to know it before being in it because you don't know what's going to emerge until you're in the space where you create the conditions for that emergent potential. Right. And then that's like the essence of dialogue, if we're looking at it from David Bohm's theories. So that would be a really big possibility that you could hold as like a hypothetical possibility and then see if it happens. I think it probably would, but you wouldn't know exactly how it would unfold until you were there. And then that might make things different each time if you were to do this more than once. But you'd probably start to recognize certain themes that are coming up from that emergent potential by focusing in on some of this. I think one example for like the Dark Night of the Soul as a session, Dark Night can be really connected to the N3 state. So one time in Kopanang, we had put stones on people's bodies, like we put rocks on their hands or on like one of their chakra points and said, try not to move. Don't physically move. Go into the corpse, be the corpse, and see what comes through from there. See if the N3 kicks over and opens up the DMT of the dream molecule, lets you get into more of the psychedelic states by purposefully not moving. So, you know, we've experimented at times with different ways to look at this. Maybe for like example, release and purgation, like Osho dynamics, if you're doing like all of this shaking exercises and like screaming things as a way to like forcefully get things to release, you might find that that does something by the time you get into the inner dance, or like start it off in the beta gammas rather than the deltas, like reverse the wave in a sense and see if that does something to trigger certain parts that usually only happen when you get to one part of the wave in relation to the music. Um, um, sorry, this one's gonna be a little bit funny. Do a cap session if you're doing the awakening, and then like call that good. um, I don't know, like that could work, right? Do it like cap and like focus on the physical part. And then yeah, maybe that brings it into the awakening thing. Um,
You just described two things I did do during the immersion. Um, we did three immersions, but in the last one I didn't use the Bennett's playlist. But I did for the first two ones. But then I also did really, really brief dynamic meditations. These are like really early in, like the first things before
cool.
we went into anything else.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think let's see, like for threshold, you could maybe bring in some like yin yoga beforehand. I think that could really help people come into the letting go, the trust, the surrender. That could be a nice way of like starting a session that was all about thresholds, because gosh, even when you hit that threshold of your own body in yin yoga, like it after a minute and a half, you're dropping. Oh my gosh, I can feel it. That was a threshold. Like my muscles totally changed over. So I would say like this would be a timing when you might want to use inner dance in conjunction with something else in order to help support the feeling of that state to really experience it fully. And then maybe that would also, if you were, trying to make a whole session around one stage. Yeah, yeah, different ways that you could bring it through.
And we had the pleasure of Nat doing yin yoga as
Oh,
well during the.
yay. I love
Trying
yin.
to think, that was before the third playlist. We did three each day.
Mm.
I was confused as to what chakra we were working on. So I just did solar plexus going into heart. Like I did like what you described, Serena, as like the in between, because I wasn't exactly sure where we were at. So it worked nicely though. How did you find it, Kate?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I think it was really nice having the mix of the modalities too, like within the session, because it kind of helped me it helps solidify how you're going to translate or work with this in different ways outside of the session as well. It was great, and to slow it down.
Mm.
My mind's totally blown, but in a really good way. I think as you were going through all of this, what kept coming up for me was like patterns of behavior, and how so much of the time you might get to a certain point and it's sticky, and you've kind of bounced back, like choice perhaps, and then not been brave enough to keep choosing, and then you kind of bounce back to self-satisfying stuff, and then you're back in it, or maybe even the dark section, and how when you're in that tunnel resisting, I guess resistance coming up at each of these places, and how that can send you back if you don't kind of acknowledge it and work through the resistance.
Mm. Definitely. Yeah. And resistance and trust are kind of always that heart space, right? So if at any time you do feel like there's resistance to any of these different stages, this is when, even in a session when you're facilitating, like come back to the heart, like you can trust this, or uh, yeah, like the self-love parts as well. Love what it is that you feel. whatever it is, right? And again too, like that part when I was mentioning like your fears love you so much. What if you just loved them back? You know, and sometimes these little verbal cues can be helpful, especially if you can tell someone's in a state of resistance. Doesn't matter what stage they're in. If you can feel that there's a resistance, like you could just help to like bring back that heart energy as a way to create the potential for things to shift. It might not shift right in that session, but just by you inviting them into another space within themselves while they're still experiencing resistance, by helping either them to be aware that you're aware of the resistance, or to feel that you're there with them, even if they're resisting this part of themselves or the process or where they're at. There's the potential for the inquiry to kind of keep going afterwards, and that can really help things break through, even if it didn't right in that session. You might hear it in their sharings, like, I became really aware. That was it. Couldn't do it any further. But now that I'm talking about it, and everything starts coming out. So that can be really amazing. And you know, it doesn't always have to be a verbal cue. A lot of times, like if I can tell that there is a resistance, maybe I just put my hand on someone's heart. You know, sometimes maybe first I'll put my hands like on their head, because a lot of times resistance is mental, and the fears are in our mind. And you know, maybe just like then moving from like, you know, the two hands on someone's head to hand on the head and hand on the heart. And that can be like a really nice way to just like bring those energies also into coherence.